Your friend's soul has been sent to the underworld. You're going to have to find her. This may sting a bit.
Let's do it.
Hi-ya! Give him hell, kid!
Maximo Ghosts to Glory is a third-person hack-and-slash adventure game and getting kicked in the dick simulator developed by Capcom and released for the PlayStation 2 in Japan in 2001 and 2002 everywhere else. Outside of North America, it was apparently just called Maximo. Before booting the game up to make this video, my exposure to the series was pretty much just those magazine ads of the guy with the heart boxers. I feel like I saw them all the time when I was little, and they didn't do much to make me want to try the game, but that's probably because it was a man in his underwear and Kid Cal was pretty predictable. If there was a serial killer trying to lure me out of a closet, he probably could have gotten it done with one of those gaming magazine swimsuit issues. I'm not proud of it, but it's still the truth. I'll tell you another truth too. Maximo has one of the strangest intros I've ever seen, and yes, even stranger than this one. Check it out.
Maximo! Achille, you told me Maximo—
Silence! That's enough, Achille! You little fool! I control your kingdom now, as I control the power of the underworld. Sophia! Behold, my dark power!
I laughed my ass off the first time I saw fat Saruman pimp-slapping Princess Sophia. No, not that one. This is a different Princess Sophia. You just don't see stuff like that in games. I mean, can you imagine starting a Mario game and Bowser just backhands Peach to the ground and then kills Mario in one hit? Context for the scene was missing in the game though, and my cousin's little brother borrowed the manual from my legally owned physical copy, so I had to go online to figure out what was happening. My audience statistics tell me that you already know that games used to come with these luxurious little booklets, and God, I miss them. When I was a kid in the back of my mom's car riding home from the game store, I would crack the plastic wrap on the box open with my teeth like a rat just to get to these things. Now you can find a lot of them scanned into the Internet Archive. They don't have the same smell though. The setup for the game is that Maximo is a king and he's been away fighting some war. While he was gone, his advisor and friend Achille took over his kingdom. He forced the woman Maximo loved into marriage and drilled a giant hole into the underworld so he could make his magic stronger with the souls of the dead. Maximo returned to his kingdom and confronted him, but was immediately killed. Floating in limbo, he gets a second chance from death himself to go back to the world of the living, defeat Achille, save the princess, and return the lost souls. It's a pretty standard intro. The game looks and plays like John Darksoul had a one-night stand with Banjo and Kazooie. I'm sure there's some Rule 34 of that out there. It's bright and colorful with bonfire checkpoints, special ability pickups, and locked gates so you can't just run past everything. Those green bars are your health, believe it or not, but if you take enough damage, your armor breaks and you lose that bar. Get down to one bar and you're fighting the forces of evil in your boxers, and even if you find a potion, you can't get that health back until you find armor first. It's kinda like a checkpoint for your enemies. The most common place to find armor is in these metal chests, but they need red keys and those aren't very common. Not all metal chests will give you armor either, so sometimes you'll burn a key and just get a few gold coins. Lives are limited, and when you run out of them, you'll have to spend death coins to revive. But whenever you do that, the number of coins you need next time increases to a maximum of 5. You can get more death coins by collecting lost souls that come out of objects in the levels, and if you don't have enough death coins, then death takes you instead. When this happens, you have to load a save. Speaking of saving, I don't know if I've ever played something that made me pay to save my game. Some enemies will steal your money and others will steal the lost souls, but most will just steal your clothes and your health. It's actually not as punishing as it might sound, and honestly I expected it to delete your save or something if you ran out of coins, but if you're used to modern games with unlimited lives and different difficulty levels, it could still be a rough transition. This difficulty was intentional. The developers wanted to go back to the classic difficulty of the game's arcade roots. In case you didn't know, because I didn't, this game is actually a sequel, kind of. It's a new story with new characters, but it's set in the same universe as the 1985 arcade classic Ghosts and Goblins, a game widely known for its brutal difficulty. Apparently, once you finally made it through that game, it would tell you that you were tricked by Satan and start you back at the first level. Then you had to do it all over again to get the real ending, but it's even harder the second time. It's kind of funny now that I think about it, because looking at the cartoony art style, you could have convinced me that this was a game for kids. Apparently, it was kind of a big selling point that the art was made by a famous Japanese artist, but when I see these, I just think that they look like characters from Guess Who. The ladies specifically are hilariously bad, but I've seen some plastic surgery pictures that tell me this is still a hot look, and I look like Frankenstein's wiener, so I'm not trying to throw any stones out of this glass house. Back on the mortal plane, Maximo needs to find the 4 sorceresses so he can face Achille, and they've all been locked in towers. The game has 5 worlds and a pretty simple format. When you get to a new world, it starts you on the first level. Once you make it through that, you'll get dumped into the world hub where you can save your game and go into the other 3 levels. Finish all of them, and then you can go into the tower and fight the boss. The bosses are pretty interesting, but they're more like puzzles than skill challenges. Think of like a Zelda boss. They hit pretty hard, but they only take a few hits to kill too. And after you hit them once, then they'll start their attack pattern over again. After you save a sorceress, you'll get to pick a reward. Either a free save, armor, or a kiss. And you'll get a new locked skill slot. The skill slot system is probably the part of the game that stood out to me the most. You start with 3 locked slots, and enemies can drop skill tokens randomly. You can hold an unlimited number of skills, but when you die, you'll drop any of them that aren't in a locked slot, and you can move them around whenever you want. It's almost a roguelike mechanic, and I thought it was a neat twist on the idea of power-ups or skill trees. The only drawback is that there are some of these skills that are massively more useful than others. For example, one lets you swing your sword a second time, and another lets you throw your shield, which is your only ranged attack. Those 2 felt almost mandatory. I know you can technically ranged attack with an enchanted sword, but it burns your limited enchantment charges, and I didn't use it very much. So anyway, once you save a lucky lady, she'll give you a new hole to fill, and you can choose to take a kiss. The kiss claims to unlock a secret, and it takes a skill slot. If you don't want to risk losing it, you'll want to keep it in a locked slot, which is going to make you a lot weaker when you die and lose all those other skills. In terms of story, there's barely any of it, but if you want to avoid spoilers, there are chapters in the timeline and the description, yada yada. This isn't your first YouTube video, unless it is, in which case, I am sorry. We save the damsels in the graveyard, the marsh, and the frozen north. It's going pretty well until Achilles shows up and sends the last sorceress to the underworld. I thought he just teleported her there, but the manual actually says that she was murdered. Bummer. With all 4 rescued, the final world is Castle Maximo. It's still a normal world with 4 levels, but at the end we face Achilles himself. And he was a fairly challenging boss fight, but eventually, through the power of God, anime, and emulator save states, we won the day. Achilles is defeated and Princess Sophia is saved.
My dear Maximo.
Sophia!
I feared you were dead. What happened to Achille?
Gone.
Excellent. My plans are nearly complete. Finally, his power transfers to me. And now, the only thing left is to devour you.
Oh, alrighty. There's legitimately no way I would have seen this coming if the game hadn't spoiled it for me. Do you remember those kisses we've been collecting? They all have item descriptions talking about some mysterious secret, but it turns out that if you collect all 4 of them, then you go to the main menu, you'll unlock the gallery option, which is disappointing. One of the pictures in there is this monster, and it's right after the princess and has the same jewel in its head that's in her crown. Still, I thought Achille must have transformed her, so her actually being evil did kind of get me. Demon Sophia was probably the high point of the whole game for me, and I think that's appropriate seeing as she's the final boss. Up until this point, the game's combat has always been the same, even if the bosses had different strategies to defeat them. But when this fight started, I was alone in the dark with only her glowing eyes to show me how she was darting around through the pillars. Suddenly that shit got pretty tense. The first time she lunged at me around this column, I legitimately jumped. She's still just a puzzle fight though, despite the cool aesthetics, so when she comes into attack, jump over her claws and smack her in the face. Oh hey, the game gave you a hint on how to beat her.
Silent!
That's nice. Once she's dead, Maximo has his kingdom again, but even surrounded by 4 Botox beauties, he's still not happy. Death comes by to congratulate him and tells him that the body on the floor is a demon and not actually Sophia. This cheers Maximo up and he's off to find the woman he loves again. It's not the greatest piece of narrative fiction, but I don't think it was trying to be. It's really just a reason to swing your sword. This game is all about the challenge. Speaking of the challenge, it's a good thing that the ads didn't grab Kid Cal, because there's no way in hell I would have gotten through Maximo when I was little. I'd probably never get through the game at its intended difficulty as an adult. I didn't really find its combat that fun, and not to sound like a games journalist, but Maximo
is a tough game. Old school tough, so you better bring your butt-stomping A game.
I don't mind dying, but I do mind having to play large sections of games over, or spending a ton of time farming for lives. Please do note though that I said the game is hard, not that the game is bad, and I do think those are different things. Whether the game is fun is an entirely third point, and I think we can come back to it later, but there's a thin yet definitive line between difficult and malicious design, and I think Maximo just barely scrapes by on the acceptable side of that line. Vanilla Maximo is a game as hard as Dark Souls likes to tell people that it is. The majority of Maximo's difficulty comes from that lovely PS2 jank and just trying to learn what the game wants you to do. Hitboxes can be irregular. Sometimes my attacks would swipe through enemies and theirs would hit me from a surprising distance. Traps are often proximity based rather than having direct triggers like I would expect from something like these bear trap platforms. I assumed they would go off when I landed on them, but they actually start to go off when you just get close to them. And the platforming is a little slippery. It kind of feels like a game from the N64, probably because this game was originally supposed to be on the N64. That might also be why there's no camera controls too. Again, none of this directly translates to the game being bad, but if you choose to play it, you should have the proper expectations. As far as fun, your mileage may vary, but I'll tell you what made it more fun for me. If you're emulating the game, I recommend grabbing the cheat codes for infinite lives. That'll bring the game down to around that Dark Souls level of challenge. You can use checkpoints like bonfires because when you respawn you'll have armor and a shield, and you can get right back into the game. This also gets rid of the need to catch lost souls at all, and lets you use or ignore the money however you please, since you can save at any time for free when you're emulating. Either way, unless you're like me and you just want to see what you missed in the past, I don't know if I can really recommend Maximo. For anyone who doesn't really love a punishing game, it won't be fun even though it did age better than I expected. If you're a person who likes getting kicked in the teeth, there are much less mechanically frustrating games out there, like Sekiro or Cuphead. I don't blame anyone who chooses one of those over this. But Maximo still has one thing that those other games don't.
Achille, you told me Maximo... Maximo...
Silence!
Heyo, did you know that only like 12% of people watch this part of the video? It's okay, I just like talking to you. Genuinely, the coolest thing that's come out of making YouTube stuff is that sometimes people will tell me that a video I made reminded them of some good gaming memory from their childhood, and I am completely in awe of that. Like, some stranger out there heard me making dick jokes and had the Ratatouille flashback to beating the first Tomb Raider with their mom or something. That's really cool shit. Also, a lot of cool people have subscribed to my channel, and I hope you know that I appreciate all of you. I just try to pretend I'm talking to one of you at a time because otherwise I will simply disintegrate under the social anxiety. They don't matter. It's just me and you out here. What's that? Oh, alright, well. You made it weird, so I'm gonna go now. As always, thanks for watching. Later.